Okay, welcome back. So in this video we're going to install a Windows Server 2012 domain controller and set up the Active Directory environment for Exchange Server 2013. So jump back into your Hyper-V Manager and we'll go ahead and create a new virtual machine. I'm going to call my virtual machine Bootcamp Domain Controller. Leave that as a Gen 1 virtual machine, allocating 2 GB of memory to mine, and connect to that external access virtual switch. Now I'm going to attach our virtual hard disk later to this one, so I'm just going to set up the virtual machine at this point. Okay, so happy with all those settings, and there we go. Leave that virtual machine off for now. So now I'm going to create a new hard disk for that machine. And VHDX is the format that I want to use, and we're going to choose a differencing disk. So this is, as it says here, associated in a parent-child relationship with another disk that you want to leave intact. So the other disk is that base image that we set up in the last video, and this differencing disk will be the one that records all of the things that are different about this server as compared to that base image. So let's call him Exchange Bootcamp. Actually, I'll just make that a little bit shorter, so I'll just call it Bootcamp Domain Controller, and I'm just going to say C for C drive, just to make it clear for servers that have multiple drives. And now we need to find the parent disk to use for that differencing disk, and there's my base 2012 virtual hard disk from the last video, so choose that one. Okay, I'm happy with all that. Now let's just go in and edit the settings of that Bootcamp Domain Controller virtual machine. And add in that hard drive. That we've just created. Apply that change. Now I'll just jump back in there. Make sure that that setting has applied. Yep, so there it is, and that we're happy with everything else as well. Alright, so let's connect to that virtual machine and power it on and see what happens. Alright, so we do need to enter the product key again, so you can just type yours in there, or you can also choose to skip it at this point, and you could install that product key once Windows is fully set up, but I'd just like to put it in at this point, it's just easier. And just go through the usual terms and conditions. Picked up those regional settings there, that's fine. Choose a local administrator password. And there we go. That was nice and quick. Okay, just give it a second for Server Manager to start up and have a look at the local server configuration. Okay, so some of my settings there are still applied. My Brisbane time zone, enhanced security configuration off, remote desktop is on. We can turn automatic updates back on now for this machine. Hopefully it won't find any updates that need to be installed, because we did all that when creating the base image. And now for a domain controller, of course, we need to assign a static IP address. You can use any IP addressing that works on your home network, that's fine. There's nothing in particular that you need to match up with my settings here. Just make sure that you're using something obviously that's available that will work on your home network, and hopefully can get to the internet, that sort of thing. Now this domain controller will be the DNS server, so I'll just put the IP address of itself in for now. And give it a computer name. You can create any naming convention for your bootcamp servers that you like. I'm going to call mine EBC for Exchange Bootcamp DC1. And of course, we need to restart for that change to take effect before we do anything else. So jumping straight back in again with that local administrator password. Okay, let's make it a domain controller. We'll go up to the Manage menu here and just choose Add Roles and Features. We're choosing role-based or feature-based installation for the local server, and we're going to install Active Directory Domain Services. Now, a whole bunch of other dependencies will appear here, management tools and things like that. So yes, we do want to go ahead and install all of those as well. We also want a DNS server role, and now we'll just skip through and complete. Alright, so with the features installed, you'll see there's a link here to actually promote this server to a domain controller. So that's what we're going to do now. And this is the first domain and domain controller in the forest, so we are adding a new forest. My training environment is exchangebooTcamp.com. Now you can use your own domain name here. You can use a dummy domain name or really any namespace at all. Just be aware of the new rules around issuing of SSL certificates for domain names that end in, for example, .local, or any domain name that cannot be resolved on the internet or cannot actually be considered valid in terms of domain names on the internet. So if you choose one here that is not valid in that respect, and then you actually do go ahead and buy a certificate, even a cheap one for use in your Exchange 2013 test lab, you'll probably run into a few problems. Now you won't run into these issues if you just choose to use your own certificate authority installed within your test lab, which is actually something I'm going to demonstrate. But I would encourage you to, look, it's only a few dollars, to just go ahead and get your own domain name or use one that you've already got. And that gives you the most freedom to really simulate as close as possible a real world environment using a valid namespace. And if you are able to, even purchasing SSL certificates for some of the later setup stages. But we will also use the free option of a local or private certificate authority. I'll demonstrate that as well. So I'm using exchangebooTcamp.com. Enter in a directory services restore mode password as well. This warning here is not unusual. You can just ignore that one. The domain also needs a NetBIOS name. I like to keep that nice and short, so I'm just calling mine EBC. And these settings for the location of the ADDS database log files and sysvol, those are fine with me. This is not a very high load domain controller. It's just for a little test lab, so I just leave those on the C drive. Okay, and I'm happy with all those settings. So we'll just go ahead and let that domain controller do its prereq checks, and then promote and create the forest and the domain for us. There we go, all prereq checks passed successfully. I'll click install. And just sit back and wait for that to all finish. So the Active Directory setup is complete. The server will restart, and now you've got a domain controller and Active Directory up and running. Now we also want to make this domain controller, we also want to install this domain controller with certificate services so that we can issue SSL certificates for our Exchange server without having to purchase them from a commercial CA. So we'll just start the add roles and features wizard, and just skip through there. And what we want to add here is the Active Directory certificate services role. So just tick that box, and there's some sub features that need to be installed. And we also want to make sure that we install this Certification Authority web enrollment, which, as it says over here, gives you a web interface for submitting certificate service requests that the Exchange server has generated. And there may be a restart required, so I'll just tick that box. Alright, so that role has been added. We just now need to configure Active Directory certificate services on this server, so just click the link there to start the configuration wizard. Tick both these boxes. We're going to configure both of these roles now. Enterprise CA is the type of CA that you want to configure. We want that to be a root CA. Creating a new private key is fine. Most of these other options are fine as well. Okay, and you can just accept the defaults basically throughout their 5 years validity period. That's fine. And hit configure. And hopefully that's all successful. So now what we can do is use that certificate authority for our Exchange SSL certificates and just save on money, since this is only a test lab environment. Now if you've done this step after installing your domain controller, then that's fine. If you've done this step after you've actually joined other servers or workstations to your domain, you may just need to update group policy or just run a GP update on those machines and give them possibly give them a restart as well, so that they recognize that this is a trusted certificate authority. Otherwise you may run into problems a little bit further down the track as we start trying to use certificates from this CA.